Hello and welcome to the Business of the Business podcast. I'm your co-host JP John Fox with you too. Man, Power Trip, of course. Joining me is the doctor himself, Dr. Lavie Margolin. Lavie, how you doing today, sir?
I'm doing good, John. I know last week when we recorded, we were literally in the midst of hearing the news of Hulk Hogan passing. Certainly, obviously, a big part of your childhood and somebody that still you follow very closely, a big part of my initial wrestling fandom. So I wanted to, in speaking with you, I wanted to do something unique today. Everyone's talking about Hulk Hogan, but I think we have a novel concept that will be interesting to our listeners.
Yes, and you're always thinking outside of the box, which I love. You're not covering something that everybody else is covering a million times. So today we're going to be remembering Hulk Hogan in a little bit of a different way, a little bit of different light. We're going to be talking about his post WCW run outside of WWE, meaning that no real WWE talk, no real WCW talk. Going to be talking some random stuff the Hulk was involved in, some big, some big, some little, some celebrities, some not some celebrities. So I think it's very, very interesting and intriguing, and I love it too because I love all things Hulk. I mean, the startup years, XWF, New Japan, NWA, TNA, Australia, all the other stuff. So, where do you want to start? Do you want to start with possibly your favorite promotion of all time, the XWF? Is that where you want to start?
So I do want to get there, John, and I'm going to lean on you a little bit for this as well. Sort of like to put us in the mindset of it, right? Hulk Hogan leaves WCW under very controversial terms, even ones that went to court. We're still not even sure necessarily what was a work, what was real, and so on, and what was meant to happen later. Left WCW, of course, in July 2000, and doesn't return again until briefly with the XWF. Now, in the interim, of course, WCW is bought by WWF. Um, you have ECW going on, and you didn't yet have TNA. So it's sort of like a barren landscape of, big paydays for wrestlers, or even necessarily like finding a forum or a way to get visibility in the United States as a pro wrestler. A very uncertain time, sort of even going into late 2001. Would you say that's the case? What was your remembrance of that time, John?
Man, it was like, wow, all of a sudden, WWF, WWE, if you will, is the only game in town. It was just a crazy, crazy time. I remember hearing about the XWF. Obviously, I got the DVD of XWF eventually down the road. But it's one of those things where it's like, man, what the hell's going to happen in wrestling? Is wrestling going to die out? WWF, you figure, okay, you buy all these companies, you're going to get all the fans, ECW fans, WCW fans. It doesn't happen like that. They kind of just fall off the map and you lose it. And, you get sprinkles of them here and there. But if you don't capture the audience with the invasion angle, and they didn't. It was terrible, one of the worst. You're not gonna you're gonna lose big chunk of the audience. So what was going to be the savior? Was it going to be XWF, which was this random show we had missed very long?
John, can you hear me?
Yes, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, it froze up for a minute. But yeah, so it was sort of like even before TNA, where you had this sort of concept of can we recapture a certain number of fans are lost. WWE was still kind of finding itself and still drawing the ratings and interest, even though there was cracks that you were starting to see even as early as late 2001, where XWF was like, hey, there's all these wrestlers, out of work. Many of them are former WCW wrestlers. What can we do here? So friends of Hulk Hogan, of course, Jimmy Hart and Brian Knobs, and investors and so on, had this concept, but certainly Jimmy Hart and Brian Knobs, forward facing. And Hogan, was around, and basically, I think the idea was that he would do a match, they could tape it, but it wouldn't be in their show or necessarily commercially released. and I don't think it ever has been. I think you probably can search, the edges of the internet for the full match. I was just watching on YouTube clips of it or shorts, which was actually enough to get the context, and then some freeze frames that happened during episode 7. Really cool concept of a match. Hulk Hogan defeats Mr. Perfect, not called that, Kurt Hennig, who's actually managed by Bobby Heenan. Really, at least through the center, the first time I think managing in a number of years. He would do some managing with Ring of Honor, but I don't think there was anything physical involved in here. And here, I think Hogan grabs him and bops him one, right? And he takes a very light bump, smartly, because his neck is hurting. But just to give some concept here of the show, so this was the 7th taping. Jerry Lawler and Tony Schiavone were the commentators. I watched the first episode, which I'm sure is proudly on, as you mentioned, John, proudly mentioned on your shelf there as one of the DVDs. But so what happened during this taping? Johnny Swinger and Simon Diamond or Dawn Marie beat Danny Dominion and Eric Priest. Dresden beat Billy Fives. Jimmy Snuka Jr. defeated Vapor. Christopher Daniels and Prince Iokea defeated Josh Matthews and Kid Trash. Jim and Duggan beat Knuckles. And, of course, Hulk Hogan beat Kurt Hennig. So very much like a hodgepodge show. And I think the concept was, or what people speculated was that, and this would be something that Hogan repeated many times, which we'll go through very smartly, was to sort of get back the intrigue of WWE. WWE, again, was pretty much the only game in town, not necessarily worldwide, but in the U.S., North America, outside of Mexico, where you could have big shows. And November, he does this taping, and then by March, he's already back in WWE, a house show where he defeats Rikishi, and then NWO, they're having what sounds amazing. Hogan, Nash, and Hall defeat Steve Austin and The Rock in Detroit on March 11th, 2002. So just a little bit more about the XWF. Excitement Wrestling Federation was brief but notable, spearheaded by Jimmy Hart and Kevin Harrington. Fill the void left by WCW, the PG-style wrestling promotion. Hogan was a key figure intended to be both a wrestler and part owner. I'm not sure how far along that got. He participated in the Universal Studios taping. It confirmed his readiness to return to wrestling. His participation was limited, primarily appearing in promotional segments and a single match against Hennig, which was later included as a bonus feature. Oh, so it was on...
it's on DVD.
Oh,
yep.
Okay. So I still have a DVD player, John. I might need to borrow it. Despite the star-studded roster, Piper, Lawler, AJ Styles, XWF struggled to secure a television deal. After the initial taping, several talents, including Hogan, were signed away by WWF. The XWF ran a few house shows in 2002, but ultimately folded due to low fan interest and financial challenges. So outside of Hogan, certainly notables like the Road Warriors, it kind of always felt like maybe we were spoiled here, but like a Northeastern indie. Like, you have like a hodgepodge. Here's some names, Greg Valentine or whatever. Here's some young up-and-comers. It never felt to me like it would have the legs to go further, and it didn't seem like to fulfill necessarily a need of what wrestling was looking for, at the time. Anything else that we should think about in terms of XWF? I know we could do a whole episode on this, and should there be a demand, we can dig deeper and kind of go more XWF. But what was interesting in watching episode 1 was the XWF kind of opening kind of felt like WXO, where they the same thing for those two television tapings, which actually aired. I remember CBS, it was like at 1 a.m. I watched at least one of them. But anything else about the legacy of the XWF and Hogan's participation, John, that we should think about?
To me, and I love the Hulkster, and I love his loyalty to his friends. So it's like, okay, you got this somewhat of a startup promotion. Knobs and Jimmy Hart obviously are the reason why he's end up doing it. Otherwise, does he really ever do it? Probably not. But what a loyal guy. Think about that. You're the most famous wrestler of all time. And I'll do a studio show, an hour away from my house for two buddies of mine. Yeah, sure. So it just shows you. But also, maybe though, Jimmy Hart's like, hey, maybe you get on Vince's radar again, or maybe Hulk's thinking, maybe I can get on Vince's radar again. Hey, I can still wrestle. I know it's a short match against Hennig, but still, like maybe just getting back on the radar. And obviously, Vince saw it and was like, I can't let this thing become anything. I'm taking Lawler, I'm taking Piper, I'm taking Hogan. I'm like, he just absolutely just destroyed XWF before it became anything. So to me, it just shows the loyalty of the Hogan. Maybe I'm being crazy on that one, but it just shows me loyalty that he's even doing that. It's just crazy. He's doing a studio show in 2001, a random studio show.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. I was just thinking about it along the same lines with Jimmy Hart, who's been, of course, the focus of a lot of people talking about him since Hogan's passing, and just how loyal he was, and how genuine he is, and being upset during the emotional. During the SmackDown last week, and all of that. So Hogan returns, and he returns through 2003, where his last match on at WWE at the time, June 24th, 2003, Team Angle defeats Big Show, Brock Lesnar, Kurt Angle, and Mr. America, who apparently is Team Angle and Big Show. It seems uneven. Defeated Brock Lesnar, Kurt Angle, and Mr. America. So, John, I wasn't watching much at the time, so I don't have much context for it. Was this the run where he lost to Brock Lesnar and then I guess switched back over and was Mr. America? Why did he leave? Did it seem like things were just like petering out at the time?
No, so 02, he loses to Lesnar, and it's so weird because he has this great run in 02. He turns babyface, but then they obviously used him to try to get Lesnar over. Lesnar breaks his ribs, and then Hogan does the book tour. And it's funny, I met him on the book tour during this time, and we're like, why aren't you fighting Lesnar Survivor Series 02, Madison Square Garden? Like, I feel like the fans would love that. Instead, we got Lesnar, Big Show. Still, and obviously Heyman turns on Lesnar and Lesnar turns babyface. So it was kind of lame. Imagine MSG in 02, Lesnar versus Hogan, the rematch from where Lesnar kind of destroyed Hulk and made him pass out and beat the hell out of him. So they basically, and really, which was great of Hulk, he was kind of used to get guys over. After, he loses to Rock, then he beats Triple H for the title, but then he loses to Undertaker, he loses to Kurt Angle, he loses to Lesnar. So he's putting guys over, and then Vince is like pretty much like, okay, your book is out, do the book tour. We're not going to use you until the next year, where he loses to Rock at the Elimination Chamber pay-per-view, and then he beats Vince McMahon at WrestleMania in a great bloody brawl that they had. So then he was kind of being used sporadically a little bit. Then he became Mr. America, which was very tongue in cheek, and they were pretending it wasn't really Hulk Hogan. He beat Roddy Piper, and they were doing all these kind of different things with Mr. America. But it was weird. It was almost like Vince wanted to use him to get guys over, but then sporadically we'd use him to promote WrestleMania, and like what I mean? He kind of used him in spots where he needed a little bit of a jolt, and then he would job him out and kind of get rid of him. But it was always a weird relationship with him and Vince, is why he was in and out, especially a lot. Because Vince, and I've heard this from several different wrestlers, which is insane to think about, but it's I guess it's true, and I do believe it. He was very jealous of Hogan. What you're thinking, like, oh, he's Vince McMahon. What, like, he wanted, and it's so funny, even his family members, he wanted the credit for the wrestling boom. Why is Hogan getting all the credit? So that feud that they had for WrestleMania 19, a lot of people said it was legit. Like, who really created WWF? Who really created wrestling? Who really pumped it up? And Vince was like, he would get mad and jealous. So him and Hogan always had that back and forth, because no one's at Vince's level, right? Maybe Hogan is. So they always had that back and forth, and there was always some bitterness there between them, and they would always argue about like creative and stuff. But Hogan did business. He jobbed to a million guys in his return in 02 and 03.
So just a few months after this last match at Madison Square Garden, Hogan goes to New Japan. An era that we're not covering at this time is, of course, Hogan had that talking about start. So one of the themes I think for today's show is sort of like being sort of like the the startup years, meaning that like he was involved in all these promotions that were trying to get off the ground. Of course, not New Japan at this period, but when New Japan was, early in its formation, he was one of its biggest stars when he would tour there. So he would always go back to New Japan, sort of in between years, and people were always surprised because he could actually work a different style, one that was more athletic style. So here he was just in for one match. He defeated Masahiro Chono at Ultimate Crush 2. So this was October 13th, 2003. It was announced as 47,000. Some places say 45,000. Hard to tell. In terms of looking at the card at the time, the only other gaijin that I see listed was Bob Sapp. So Hogan's appearance at the Tokyo Dome marked his final match in Japan. He faced Chono in a Super Dream match accompanied by Jimmy Hart. Hogan wrestled as a face. He had a more technical style. He used his X Bomber finisher, which was more known in Japan. So that's the New Japan match. The aspect that relates more to Startup Nation and NWA TNA comes more at the press conference. So before we go to the press conference part, John, any more thoughts on the New Japan relationship and this final match?
I really enjoyed this match. I remember I got this on VHS tape, if you will, actually probably DVD at that point from High Spots. But I just remember like, wow, this is just like random. I love random matches and stuff and random things. But it was such a big draw in Japan. They always try to kind of get him back and draw a little bit, and then he'd be gone. He really only use him just for one-offs and stuff. But I love that attitude about it. But again, also, was he doing that to kind of say to Vince, like, well, I'll go make money over here if you're not going to use me, and then Vince would bring him back again. So it was kind of like a little bit of a give and take. I always felt like there was like a Vince element to things where he's like, I could be a WWF making money, but okay, New Japan's going to give me a boatload. I'll take this, and then Vince brings him back.
And what was interesting about that same night, he like doubled it because then he brought NWA TNA into the fold. And just this experience for NWA TNA was something that probably disappointed them, right? If they were hoping to sign Hogan and those discussions happened. But it really was footage that they used on their show, even the match.
Oh, forever, yeah.
I forget if it was in the opening or whatever, but Jarrett attacking Hogan was something that, especially pre-2010, that they got so much mileage out of them, and it made them seem even bigger than they were. So what happened? Post-match, Jeff Jarrett, then NWA World Heavyweight Champion, attacked Hogan with a guitar during a press conference, setting up a potential NWA match at TNA's first 3-hour pay-per-view, because Hogan said in the interview that he's never been the NWA champion and he'd like to be. So Jarrett comes into the press conference, kabines him. However, due to Hogan's recurring knee and hip issues, the match never materialized, or so they say, in terms of the issues. And he did not join TNA at the time. This appearance was a significant moment as it capitalized on Hogan's star power to boost the event's appeal, though the show itself struggled to capture widespread interest. So just a little bit more. Hulk Hogan came close to signing with NWA TNA following his appearance at Ultimate Crush. This angle was designed to leverage Hogan's star power to boost TNA's visibility. However, despite negotiations in the promotional setup, Hogan did not sign with TNA due to ongoing knee and hip issues. Flirtation with TNA ultimately fizzled out. Hogan did not appear for the promotion at the time. Also, something interesting in watching the press conference over the last day, Jarrett was wearing all white, and Hogan bladed like really all the way across the forehead. But with people getting in between and fighting Chono, I don't know if some timing got messed up because Jarrett did not get any blood on his clothing.
That was awesome. Like just like the thought of it, and it was like, wow, this is going to be awesome. This is going to be so big, and this is going to be cool. Awesome for like the footage, but it's crazy the match never happened. And Hogan, basically he gets his ass beat. Jarrett destroyed him, made him bloody. So it was one of those things where obviously Hogan wanted to do business, but it just didn't work out injury wise.
Yeah, and what do you think, John? Like, it was an interesting time because TNA had stabilized to some NWA TNA had stabilized to some degree. at that point, but they were still like, so tight on money and multiple tapings and all of that I don't know what they could have offered Hogan, to make it worth his while. Maybe like for one match or whatever, you'd have to give him like a percentage of the company and whatever it may be. Like, so being a longtime Hogan historian, do you think that this had any shot if WWE didn't have any interest? And like, what do you think it would have done to NWA TNA at the time?
Man, this could have been something where maybe they were going to give him a significant portion and hoping that this would land them a TV deal. You put Hogan attached to it. Obviously, we know the history of Hogan. You attach him to anything, you're going to get more interest. Look at Real American Freestyle. Look at the beer. I mean, you just put his name on it, even at 71 years old, and people are kind of, having an interest in it. So especially back then, definitely, I think they were shooting for some sort of somehow they're going to get him this big money deal. Maybe the Carters were going to pony up some of their big time money and do it. But I feel like they were maybe going to negotiate with him, maybe give him a piece of the company or something. But they were definitely kind of positioning where hey, maybe we do this one match with him, we give him a ton of money, and we get a TV deal out of it.
Yeah, and interestingly, maybe there were more health issues, as listed, because it wasn't like it immediately sparked WWE bringing him back. Because
right.
What I'm looking here, he didn't return till Backlash 2005. Hogan and Shawn Michaels defeat Khosrow, Lavie, and Muhammad Hassan in 15 minutes and 20 seconds in New Hampshire.
Yeah, and he basically was inducted into the Hall of Fame that year as well. So it was weird, like what was going on with Hulk at that point. But obviously, he had a couple surgeries, hip surgery, back, so he did have issues where they probably wished that they could have used him earlier, if you will. And obviously, TNA wished they could have used him at all. Would have been amazing.
So Hogan lasts for about a year, a little bit more than a year. His last match in WWE, and that return is SummerSlam 2006 in Boston, where he defeats Randy Orton in just under 11 minutes. Then 6 months, no wrestling. And he comes back for really one of the most interesting things, because it's sort of like, depending on how you count the attendance, one of the biggest like pro wrestling super shows of the 2000s, where he wrestles the Big Show, or Paul White, at the FedEx Forum in Memphis. And from what I was reading, it was supposed to be Jerry Lawler against Hulk Hogan in this big match, which would have been so much bigger than it was. What do you remember, like, first hearing about Hulk Hogan coming to Memphis?
I remember thinking, like, wow, this is kind of like cool. It's old school, but also like, how will it draw? Will it draw well? It's 2007. It's weird that Hogan is wrestling basically the Giant again, the Big Show, but really, the Giant from WCW, and they're reliving that feud, and it's in Memphis. So it just kind of like surprised, and it's obviously at the FedEx Forum, but just surprised that it was even going on, but kind of intrigued at the same time, wondering if Hogan still had it, at this point. Obviously very advanced in age, and he's getting up there, but one of those cool things is like, wow, WWE is letting this happen. Like, this is crazy. Can't believe this.
Yeah, it was interesting that, like, you also had this sort of like, obviously with Lawler, it would have been a lot of nostalgia. And interestingly, as I learned more about history, like, I thought with USWA, like in '97, like, the ability to draw in Memphis was dead. But even like Power Pro, when they had use of Mid-South Coliseum, they were able to draw a few like really big houses. Here, it's a little bit unclear looking back years later. Cage match listed at 4,500. I've seen others listed at 2,500. The video that's on YouTube, which is clips of the match, most of which was Paul White bear hugging Hulk Hogan. And what was cool was that I don't know if they were the cameras that were used like when you run Mid-South or whatever, but like it had that like grainy feel to it. It had that old school feel to it, which I thought actually worked better. So just to get a sense of the card that took place on April 27th, 2007. Moondog Cujo beat the Barbarian. Greg Valentine beat Mr. Hughes. Jazz, in a triple threat, defeated Christine Ricci and Miss Passion. A no contest. This sounds very intriguing in like a weird way. Hardcore match: Abdullah the Butcher against Al Green. Tag team. This is very Memphis. Bill Dundee and Dutch Mantel with Jimmy Valiant defeated Bobby Easton and Sweet Brown Sugar. Brutus Beefcake and Bubba the Love Sponge defeated the New Assassins. Brian Christopher defeated Buff Bagwell. Kid Cash and Ricky Morton defeated Too Cool 2. You know my affinity for Too Cold Scorpio. But Too Cool 2, Flex and Grind, which was a title change. And the Hogan match was 6 minutes, 26 seconds long. So actually, maybe I did see the whole match. Just a little bit of a summary. Hogan headlined the PMG. PMG was like something with like financial sponsorship. Clash of Legends, a professional wrestling pay-per-view. I don't remember it being a pay-per-view. Promoted by Memphis Wrestling Corey Macklin on April 27th at the FedEx Forum. Initially, Hogan was scheduled to face Jerry Lawler in a Clash of Legends. However, for months on Memphis Wrestling prime time. However, WWE barred Lawler from competing due to a contractual conflict involving NBC Universal, appearing on VH1, which aired Hogan's reality show Hogan Knows Best. This led to a lawsuit by Macklin. As a result, Paul White replaced Lawler. Hogan defeated White in the main event, executing a body slam followed by a signature running leg drop to secure the pin. The event drew 2,200, generating $104,500 as listed by The Observer as a significant independent wrestling undertaking aimed at a non-Hispanic audience. The Hogan-Lawler cancellation and subsequent lawsuit garnered considerable attention, but the event proceeded with Hogan's star power as a focal point, despite WWE's restrictions, causing other scheduled performers like the Boogeyman, Charlie Haas, Shelton Benjamin, and Robert Gibson to also withdraw. So when all was said and done, John, and you heard about this, did it feel like, okay, they got through it, but I don't think like there's going to be a Memphis revival, or I don't think Hogan is going to be doing like some other independents, right?
Yeah, 100%. Yep, exactly.
So one that I've avoided. I did not watch any clips, John. I give you credit if you do, if you were a fan or did watch the show. Celebrity Championship Wrestling. The man's done nothing wrong that I'm aware of or whatever. I just don't like Danny Bonaducci. He bothers me. I found Dustin Diamond's Screech by Saved by the Bell kind of annoying in this context. But it was a show on CMT from October 18th to December 6th. I read more about it in Bischoff's book. That's probably the most I know about it. But were you a watcher, and what did you think about all this?
No, was not a watcher. I've seen clips of it and stuff. I for some reason, I don't know why, I don't know, like when guys are doing something that you love that aren't experts and they're amateurs and they're not, I wouldn't say making a joke of it, or making a mockery, but it's like they're doing it really, except for Dennis Rodman, to be honest, but everybody else kind of does it very poorly. It came off kind of like, so I only just kind of paid attention to clips. I really wasn't as interested in it. Maybe I should have been, but what didn't kind of catch me.
Yeah, and if they couldn't get you, John, like as Hulk Hogan super fan, and I mean, I think they did okay in the ratings, but you know, it's going to be a struggle, kind of like a different carve out. For some reason, I thought Hogan like also hosted like a little person wrestling show, but that might have got conflated in my mind that there's been little person reality wrestling shows, and Hogan has had shows like this, but Hogan never hosted a little person wrestling show, right, John?
Not as far as I remember. Okay. Hopefully, it's not one of those. What do you call it? That effect or whatever, the Berenstein Bears thing. I hope it's not one of those things. You know what I mean? We're thinking about it.
Yeah, it got conflated in my mind. That would have been probably even more interesting. So, okay, so
Mandela effect. There you go, the Mandela effect.
Yes. So So now 2007 to 2009, where we're going to talk about the Australian tour, was Hogan involved in anything WWE centric in between Memphis? Well, I guess not, because he did the celebrity wrestling in the middle there. And then going to Australia, was there any WWE? There was no WWE matches between them. Okay, so
Nope.
now the Australian tour. The first thing I remember about the Australian tour was I think it was some sort of mainstream photo where Hogan and Flair had both bladed. They were both in their late 60s, and there's sorry, no, late 50s, mid to late 50s, and there's sort of like that thing, like look at this pathetic situation, right? Like sort of like the wrestler type of thing. I think that was really the wrong perspective of it. I don't think either, Flair's like issues with money documented, and Hogan too, in terms of divorce and of course his son's, I don't know if it was deemed an accident, whatever it may be, with the driving and somebody getting very hurt. It was accidental, but whatever it was in the courts, that yes, they might have been harder off for money, but I don't think like this was like a desperate thing. They weren't like hitting the local VFW. This was like a big time thing that the promoters in Australia spent a lot of money on it. It just didn't work out.
Yeah, exactly. I didn't really think it was going to be anything big, but it's one of those things where a lot of famous wrestlers always do these random tours. South Africa, Australia, when you get Hogan's name attached to it, obviously it's going to be called the Hulkamania Tour, which they've done forever when WWF did the Hulkamania tours. And literally, I have a ticket of it from England. Hulkamania Tour. So it's just one of the things you get the biggest name ever and get them associated with it. It's perfectly fine, and it is what it is. It was a nostalgia tour.
What was really incredible about it is that both guys could have dialed it in. Of course, Flair never did, and I wouldn't say Hogan did ever either. But at their age, looked like there wasn't many days off in between. It went from November 21st to 28th. At 4 days, and each was like 25-minute match, all against Flair, probably the same finish. In the picture they bladed, I'm not sure which night the video was from, they bladed, so they probably did every night. I'm not sure if you've seen it, John. There's an interesting like sort of raw video where they first show the promos in the back and Flair does his. They don't cut the video off, and you see off camera Hogan was like, what the F did he just say? So that he could get a sense of like what type of promo he would cut, and then he just does one off the cuff, just based on somebody reporting to him. And they had the match. So I just watched a video over the last day as well with Eric Bischoff, like a clip from his podcast with Conrad and so on, where he's talking about that, unfortunately, according to him, only half the money was put in escrow. The other performers were paid, and that he and Hogan weren't. But at the very least, whatever happened, that Hogan didn't make all of his money from this tour. So kind of a disaster in that way. So and I think this shows from what I was looking at quickly that they each did like 4,000 to 5,000 each. These were all like in, I think, major venues, but the cost and the advertising and all of it, that they weren't that it wasn't successful. Some of the names are plays on words here, but you could pick up our listeners who these people are. So assuming the same card every night, unless somebody got hurt or whatever. But on the fourth night, Sean Morley defeated the Pimp Father. Billy Blade and Caden Anthony against the Nasty Boys, double DQ. Nick Dinsmore beat Heidenreich. Brian Christopher and Solafa Fatu Jr. defeated Black Pearl and Vampire Warrior. Orlando Jordan defeated Brutus Beefcake. Shannon Moore defeated Spartan 3000. Mr. Anderson defeated Uso Fatu. And Hogan was accompanied by Jimmy Hart, and Flair was accompanied by Lacey Von Erich. Just a little bit more about this tour. Hulkamania Let the Battle Begin was a professional wrestling event promoted by Hogan and Eric Bischoff, making Hogan's first wrestling appearance in Australia. I wouldn't say it was promoted by them, right? Because there's Australian promoters. Held tour featured in Melbourne, Perth, Brisbane, and Sydney. Taped by 1HD but never aired. The main event for each show was a match between Hogan and Flair. Flair coming out of retirement to perform as a heel. Hogan, accompanied by Jimmy Hart, won all 4 matches. Roster included British Beefcake, Mr. Anderson, Umaga, Rikishi, the Nasty Boys, with additional attractions like a bikini contest won by Lisa Von Erich. Despite Hogan's media blitz and the tour's star-studded lineup, it averaged 5,000 people per show, below expectations, due to oversized venues and limited merchandise sales. Hogan's physical condition was a concern, as he was dealing with severe back issues, making his participation a risky endeavor, though Ric Flair's presence helped make Hogan's performance look stronger. The tour was organized by Condon Sports and Entertainment, with significant contributions from Black Pearl, cousin of Rikishi, who had connections in Australia. Despite the professional execution and incredible promotion, the tour was a financial failure. Promoters overestimated ticket sales, booking large arenas that remained largely empty, leading to significant losses. The company behind the tour filed for bankruptcy shortly after the final event on November 28, 2009. Plans for a DVD release of the tour were abandoned, partly because Hogan withheld permission to market it until outstanding payments owed to him were settled. The financial flop also led to the cancellation of planned TNA Australia tour and scrap discussions for further tours in China and Asia. So I know, like, you know, you always like hope for the best in these sort of things, but kind of felt like magical thinking, right? Like to think that you could fill up these huge venues when no one was really doing that anywhere in the world, even with like the biggest names. But 5,000 average, obviously it was bloated in terms of whatever budget, but in terms of a number on his face, that's pretty good.
Interesting. Very intriguing. Now, I know, obviously, we have to talk about TNA and the run in TNA wrestling, which was interesting because it did lead to, I know a lot of people are like, oh, it led to the downfall, but it did lead to their highest ratings ever, too. So there obviously is a lot of misses and stuff in there, but Spike TV deal was big, and obviously a lot of huge ratings, like 2 million people plus watching Hulkster.
Yeah, and to me, like as a fan, that was the greatest context that I had. Like I remember the announcement of Hulk Hogan coming to TNA, and like it did feel like, you know, that at this point, right? Like because TNA was ascending, right? Like in a number of ways, like it did have buzz, it had great matches or whatever. Like without knowing that, and it should have been obvious, but without knowing that there'd be this like turnover in administration and all these issues, that putting Hogan on top of a mix that was working already, like could be really something, but it didn't turn out that way. When you first heard Hogan was coming to TNA, what were your expectations for it?
It's weird because WWF at this point was awful. Like, and almost like I wouldn't say unwatchable, but it was terrible. John Cena's awful. Like all it's like just really, you know, boring stuff. So it's kind of like relying on TNA to maybe like kind of have some saving grace here and the nostalgia of Hogan. But you know, some obviously there was some good, there was some bad too. There was no doubt about that. But I was kind of hoping that it was going to be bigger and better and kind of maybe save wrestling for me at that point.
Yeah, so that like Monday night, the one that they went head to head with WWE, was like, it was really enjoyable. It was mostly a great 3 hours, but like at the end of the night, it felt like, okay, you hot-shotted everything.
Yes,
you brought everybody out. Like it was cool nostalgia, even like Nasty Boys or whatever. But what are you going to do next time? In my mind, they ran again Monday night, but in reading about it later, they didn't, right? There was like a break or whatever. And then when they finally did go head to head, like the second or third week of that, it was like Eric Bischoff playing the guitar in the ring. And it's sort of like you gave up. And the ratings were like 0.6 or whatever it may be. But that one night was really cool. So reading the match results doesn't necessarily give the context of it, because a lot of it was just like Hogan, Sting, Flair, RVD, you know, all that, Bischoff, all that sort of stuff. But a bad omen, John, I don't know if you remember that weird Steel Asylum cage match where it was just, I felt so bad for him. Homicide trying to like get up there.
That was hard. The concept is so bad. Yes.
And it felt like forever, but it was only a 4-minute, 30-second match. But I think like that really, I mean, obviously he had the LAX, I think later, right? So he came back and all that sort of stuff from that. But that really like had to have been like a terrible thing to experience. So Also no contest. ODB beat Tara in a 2-minute 40-second title change. Awesome Kong, which was one of the only wrestlers, especially in TNA at the time, that I went out of my way to see. Awesome Kong and Hamada defeated Sarita and Taylor Wilde. TNA Women's Knockout Tag Team title. Hernandez and Matt Morgan defeated Dr. Stevie and Raven with Daphne. D'Angelo Dinero defeated Desmond Wolfe. Samoa Joe defeated Abyss in 4 minutes 50 seconds. And AJ Styles defeated Kurt Angle, 22 minutes 5 seconds. Obviously, that sounds great. So Hulk Hogan signed with TNA Nonstop Action on October 27, 2009, partnering with Eric Bischoff and TNA president Dixie Carter to elevate the company. He debuted on January 4, 2010 during a live 3-hour special. Hogan and Bischoff promised to flip the company upside down, but their tenure was marked by controversial changes, including moving Impact to Mondays, abandoning the six-sided ring, bringing in Nasty Boy Scott Hall and Sean Waltman, which alienated fans and failed to boost ratings. Online, there was like a breakdown in terms of different eras. I'm not like so familiar with the eras. I just couldn't take that crap to begin. But it helps us to know like when the Hogan matches took place. 2010, Dixie Carter's business partner and Immortal formation. So Hogan. So from what I understand with Dixie Carter and so on, the idea was that Hogan would be available to wrestle a lot more than he did. And at the end of things, there was just 5 matches that he was involved in, 2 in 2010, 1 in 2011, and 2 in 2012. So during this era, there's a 2-minute, 21-second no contest between Abyss and Hulk Hogan against AJ Styles and Ric Flair on March 8th, 2010. Do you have any context for that match, John?
I just oddly remember kind of like, it's weird. Like I was kind of, it maybe shouldn't have, but it was enjoyable to me for some reason. I kind of liked it. Just the odd booking, though, like the way they did it, though. Just kind of like they'd have the match and they come back later and do it again. Just odd booking.
Yes, and thank you, John. I neglected to mention that in the same night, so people got more out of Hogan, more time. Abyss and Hogan did defeat AJ Styles and Ric Flair in 7 minutes and 55 seconds. Now, was this the type of thing where like Hogan would start out the match and then just be out of it for most of it, or like kind of get tagged in at the end, or was it a nearly like equal exchange with Abyss?
Honestly, I haven't seen it in a while. I watched it obviously live when it happened, and maybe once again after that. I don't really remember him being like, I know obviously a huge part of the match, but I think if I remember correctly, Abyss kind of handled most of it. Yeah,
that makes sense. So 2011, they kind of power struggles and return to face. So attendance 3,585 at the Licorris Center in Philadelphia. TNA Bound for Glory 2011. This was, of course, Sting defeats Hulk Hogan with Ric Flair at 9 minutes 43 seconds. I watched this on YouTube about a year and a half ago, and enjoyable match, and I think the most you could expect at that time.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, what can you expect? And obviously, they're going for a big TV rating, having Hogan wrestle on the show.
So the matches for the night, to provide some context: Austin Aries defeated Brian Kendrick, Rob Van Dam defeated Jerry Lynn, Crimson defeated Matt Morgan and Samoa Joe, Mr. Anderson defeated Bully Ray, Velvet Sky defeated Winter, Madison Rayne, and Mickey James. In an I Quit match, AJ Styles defeated Christopher Daniels, and finally Kurt Angle defeated Bobby Roode. So the Hogan era was coming to an end in 2012 as an active, semi-active performer, where he was actually in Nottinghamshire, and Manchester in the UK. TNA Maximum Impact Tour 2012. I was just watching Hogan in the long pants, sort of trying to get a rise out of the crowd as he exited the ring for the final time on January 27, 2012, having wrestled the day before. Hogan, James Storm, and Sting defeated Bobby Roode, Bully Ray, and Kurt Angle. And I saw on YouTube both matches were, I think, fully uploaded. John, what did you think about this at the time, and did you have a chance to watch those matches?
At the time, nothing crazy, nothing, to write home about necessarily, but I actually really liked Hogan Sting Bound for Glory. I thought it was really good, maybe better than most of their WCW matches, which is crazy to say, but it was bloody, it was crazy, the crowd was nuts. I feel like it was like one last big Hogan great match, one bad, big moment for Hulk. Maybe for others, maybe nothing right home about, but for me, for Hogan fans, we loved it because it was almost like a little bit of shot of in the old Hogan there. He looked like a little bit more spry. He looked like he could go a little bit. He actually looked better than maybe the Randy Orton match from 5 years earlier. He looked great in that Sting match. It's crazy that was one of their better matches than most of the WCW matches, which were, 15 years earlier, 10, 12, 14 years earlier. So that's pretty crazy to say. Although, just throw this out there, my buddy Phil Schneider, writer for The Ringer and all the other places, he sent me, and he posted it online as well, part of an article, Sting versus Hogan from a house show, the LA Melee in 1998. That was an awesome cage match. I feel like that could have been their Starrcade match or so many other matches. That was awesome. Maybe that was their best match, but this is up there, one of the best Hogan Sting matches.
Yeah, I guess, as sort of like a lion in winter, right? Sometimes it's like a little bit sad to see wrestlers sort of like in the latter days of their career and they don't look the same. But Hogan delivered in his final pay-per-view match against a obviously very high-profile opponent, and in relative TNA terms, they drew a good house.
Yep, definitely. So
this was such a like a unique time period, 2001 to 2013, that it was just so difficult to create a contender to WWE. TNA got pretty close there in terms of drawing millions of people sometimes, and once in a while drawing a big house. One that may or may not have just been beaten, in Long Island here. But there was no consensus like number two following this for a while, right? You had TNA, then Ring of Honor, New Japan sort of ascended at the same time, and it was sort of like we talked about who was number two at that time, but it was never clear. But, and I know people are trying to cloud it now with like who can be number two or whatever, but clearly since 2019, AEW is number two. And it was sort of the first time that one didn't look to Hulk Hogan as being necessary to become the number two. Now, I'd assume that Tony Khan was a Hulkamaniac, as how can you not be? But following, all the Hogan controversy from racist remarks on tape to sex tape to whatever, that Khan, I don't know if he had banned, this is just the word, banned just Linda Hogan, or Hulk Hogan as well, but like he was basically hands off from that. Do you think that if there was not as much controversy, or even if there was controversy, more of a need, that Tony Khan would have embraced Hulk Hogan more?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, it's just kind of common sense. And just for the history of wrestling, I think that's just like not always a slam dunk necessarily, but one of those like easy things where it's like, well, let's just get Hogan's name attached to it. We could use the jolt.
So, John, as as a Hogan biographer, I want to give the final words on this topic to you. In terms of the business of wrestling and the story of Hulk Hogan, what did these startup years of 2001 to 2013 mean, A, to Hulk Hogan, and B, to the pro wrestling business at the time and where we are today?
To be honest, it's one of those things where, it's not necessarily like big news or anything. Obviously, the big news of Hogan was the two boom periods, the 80s and the 90s. He created with Hogan and Hulkamania, and he created again with the NWO. Here in this era is one of those things where they're using him and his name for a jolt, and it's like a nostalgia thing, or just to pop a rating, or just to, hey, we need money to put him in the Hall of Fame, let's pop WrestleMania, let's pop tickets for the Hall of Fame, let's bring him in for SummerSlam 2005 for Michaels. We need a jolt. We're dying here. It's not doing well at all. We'll bring in Hogan for a jolt. We'll sell a bunch of merch. Again, let's do a tour in Australia. Let's try to get a jolt going if we can here. Let's do a jolt in Memphis. TNA needs a jolt. Let's use Hogan. And it's one of the things where it's almost like synonymous with wrestling. It worked in WCW. It worked in WWF. Worked, obviously, again with the NWO. It's just one of those things where it worked again in 2002. Gave them a bit of a jolt, not only bringing back the NWO, but Hogan versus Rock. And everyone talks about that as one of the greatest matches of all time. So he's always kind of been used as a jolt now for businesses, whether it be Real American Freestyle, Real American Beer, his beach shop, the Hogan's Hangout. He's always kind of using that name and his cultural status. And he's the Babe Ruth of wrestling, but he's also a part of the lexicon. He's mainstream. So people always kind of associate him and kind of use him because he's bigger than the business and more popular than the business. So using him as kind of a lightning rod for what they were trying to do. So New Japan, it helped a bit. Obviously, TNA helped a bit to a certain point. Then it kind of fizzled out. But it was always something that they were using the Hulkamania name and the Hulkamania brand and the Hogan and the mustache and everything else to try to enhance their business because, hey, he's one of the most famous people of all time. And we were saying that now. It's like, thought Ozzy Osbourne was famous. Man, he is like 100 times more famous than Ozzy Osbourne, as proved by all the coverage of everything. So just absolutely what we're trying to kind of use him and his name and his likeness. And obviously, he goes along for the ride. It's a business, brother. It's a shoot, brother. So he's just one of those guys that will go down in infamy, good or bad, whatever you want to say, right or wrong. He's Babe Ruth. He's Michael Jordan. He's Gretzky. He's Frank Sinatra. He's one of the most famous people of all time, and you're going to use that to your advantage, whether you're Hogan or a business partner of Hogan or a wrestling company or startup that wants to have an influx of money and attention and everything else. You kind of go hand in hand and create a business and really a venture with the Hulkster.
Well said, John. I think a special episode, not one that we want to have had to do anytime soon, but I think really brings unique perspective on not only a time period, but within that time period, those little niches that people often skip over and forget.
Yeah, I love this. I thought this was a great idea because nobody really talks about XWF or New Japan Hogan or Hogan randomly in TNA or hitting over the head with the guitar from Jarrett or the Memphis match against Paul White and obviously the TNA run and maybe people are talking about aces and eights, but in like maybe more of a joking manner. So it's just an interesting kind of time period and to go back and look at it, reflect it, because as a Hulkamaniac and trying to live through the nostalgia, it's like, man, I'm going to give Hogan one more chance for one more run because I want to feel what I felt when I was a kid and want to feel again what I felt when I was growing up in high school for the NWO. So it's like you kind of keep giving them the chances and the opportunity to kind of relive that moment again and feel what you felt and feel the power of Hulkamania, if you will.
Yeah, makes sense.
So, Lavie, let's hit the plugs and head towards the finish here. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at 2Man Power Trip. Happy you.
Follow me on X at LavieMarg, LavieMarg. Join our LinkedIn group, The Business of the Business, on LinkedIn, and check out my long-form articles on linecubjobsearch.com. Please rate, review, and share this podcast. Let's get the word out.
All right. Thank you to Lavie, and thank you everybody out there for listening. See you right back here next week for a little business of the business. R.I.P. Hulkster.